Hello and
Hello.
welcome to the live. My name is J.R. Carroll. I'm the author of the More Than Human novels, and here today, this is the 10th installment. So we're into double digits here with a More Than Human conversation with a guy that you may know, or if you don't know, you're going to get to know. And this is Cliff from Cliff's Dark Gems. He is the man searching all of the horror and dark books to find the gems for you to read. Hello, Cliff.
Hey, how you doing, man? Good to see you.
Good to see
Thanks
you
for
as
having
well.
me.
Yeah, so I like to start these off anytime I do these by just asking who got you into reading? Was it your mother, father, grandparents? Like, who's the one that kind of pushed you into, getting into reading?
Hey, as a 52-year-old, you're making me go a long way back here. But I mean, I've been reading all the time. My mom and dad obviously encouraged it right from the beginning. My mom used to read me bedtime stories. Used to
Nice.
read me with me when I was really, really young. But yeah, I've loved it since, yeah, all the time. Obviously, when I started to go to school, primary school, sort of set out on my own a bit. They didn't encourage me as much, but by that time, I was good to go. And I started reading a lot of fantasy when I was at primary school. That was actually my first love. That's the stuff that I really got into before starting to get into horror.
Oh, so okay, that's cool. So you started off as a fantasy reader. Is
Yeah,
that how,
yeah,
so? What was the first? And this is another question because most of the people who are on my channel are fantasy sci-fi readers. So
yeah.
what was the first fantasy book that you can remember reaching for yourself? Not somebody give to you, but like, oh, this is interesting. I'm gonna go read this.
Okay, I was going to say Narnia, but I'm going to
Okay.
go back even further than that. No, I'm going to
Ooh.
go back further than that. Okay, I'm going to go back to like grade 3, grade 4, The Magic Faraway Tree by Enid Blyton.
Okay. Okay. You
That's
guys tell me
that's the
about that
first thing
one.
I can actually get into. Yeah,
Okay. Yeah. What's that about?
that's Enid Blyton. It's a children's series. This big old tree with these characters. Hey man, I can't remember. We're going way back here. Character like there was a Mr. Moonface. There were just all these magical characters that lived on different branches of the tree and just
Okay.
adventures with these characters. So Enid Blyton, I mean, that's a real children's author. So that's the first thing I really got into. And then
That,
after that, it was all about Narnia. Narnia
okay.
was my first epic fantasy series.
Yeah, that's
Up to
always
that.
seems to be up there. Narnia, then a lot of people say The Hobbit, and then the Wizard of Earthsea. A lot of people are like,
Yeah,
those are
yeah,
like
all
the.
that stuff. Yeah. But
So
Narnia for me was a big one. Yeah,
so for you, and this is a lot of I hear a lot of people do this or have been doing this on BookTube over the last couple of years. Like they'll go back and start reading some of those. Does Narnia? Have you went back to Narnia at
no,
in?
no, 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 no. That was a child thing. Yeah, that's a childhood special thing. Um, I don't want to go
Don't
back and
want to
ruin it.
ruin the nostalgia.
No, I don't want to ruin it for myself. Eh?
Yeah. So
Yeah,
you're known as the dark gem, the horror, the shocking
yeah.
book. What started you down that path of horror? I assume you went to horror before you went to the shocking books, I'm guessing.
Oh yeah. No, no, no. I mean, like, I think it's kind of a beginning of high school. I actually read a lot of Roald Dahl. Now, Roald Dahl short stories are actually quite dark. And we had to actually learn them at school.
Okay.
But there's a lot of that kind of twist in the tail thing. And they're pretty dark. There's some real horrific stuff there. And then when I was about 14, 15, by that time I was reading all sorts of fantasy. And then I discovered it. And I
Oh,
basically discovered Stephen King, and I never looked back. Through high school, I basically devoured everything by Stephen King that I could get my hands on.
so what do they call
So
the
that was my spark
constant
into horror.
readers? Is that what the
Sorry?
Stephen King people?
Say that again?
Uh, consummate. What are they called? The consummate readers or constant readers?
Yeah, constant readers. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, people who read all Stephen King because he has so much stuff you can just keep reading.
Yeah, exactly. I'm still a constant reader.
Yeah, I'm trying. I was introduced to Stephen King through The Dark Tower, and
Okay.
so I went all through The Dark Tower, and then I was like, well, I mean, that's his big fantasy series. So I was like, but let's get into, start getting into. So I went from the beginning. I read Carrie, then I did,
Yeah,
I did his werewolf book, and
yeah.
then Cujo.
That's something about the silver bullet or
Yeah,
silver.
it was.
Yeah,
It was a very short, very
yeah, yeah.
traditional
Isn't
werewolf
it a graphic
story.
novel? Isn't it kind of a
Yeah,
graphic novel?
yeah. I
The
think it's
cycle of the werewolf.
Cycle of the Werewolf. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think it's most known for the drawings in the book, even more than the
yeah,
story. Because I don't have the physical copy, though I want to get it because some of the art in it was amazing. Yes,
yeah.
Cycle of the Werewolf. Yeah,
Yeah.
she's got it. But yeah, and one thing, like, have you read Cujo? I assume.
I've read Cujo. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've read everything he's written from the 70s, 80s, and most of the 90s.
Wow. Yeah. I think
Yeah,
that Cujo is underrated. I always ask
it is
people this who have
underrated.
read it. Like, I don't hear anybody talk about it, but when I read it, I'm like, that's pretty dead. Like the way, because if you've read The Dark Tower, he goes off on tangents
Yeah,
and
yeah.
stuff like that. But like
It's
this,
called his
it worked.
multiverse. It's called his, yeah.
Yeah, it worked really well because he had like two or three stories going on at once in Cujo, and then at the end, it all they all meet, like all the stories collide, and you're like, oh, and then that ending. Oh man, that ending on
No,
Cujo.
it's something else. Have you seen the movie?
Yeah, I seen the movie when I was a kid. When
And
I was probably too young. I shouldn't have.
how different the book is from the movie. The ending between the movie and the book, very different.
Yeah.
Hey, brutal, very brutal.
Yeah. Cujo is heartbreaking. Yeah, definitely one of his more underrated books. So how did you first get into BookTube? What, like, were you watching BookTube for a while and then someone convinced you, or did you always kind of want to do it?
Yeah, I've actually only been a booktuber since I think it was January this year. And I was watching maybe last year for about 2-3 months. Before that, I didn't even know about BookTube at all. But when we moved here, I had a bit more time on my hand. I started watching online. I started reading again because for a long time we didn't read a lot. And yeah, I just fell in love with it. I started watching all these videos, getting these recommendations. And then I thought this year, hey, I can do this. Let's give it a go. I've read a lot. Yeah,
man, you're doing really good. I mean, you're getting a lot of good views, and I think like the horror genre on BookTube is really starting to blow up, and so and as I was kind of, because if you've only been on for like a year, I probably caught you pretty early there because I've been watching your stuff for quite some time now, for several months.
Awesome.
Yeah. And I know that Clive Barker is towards the top of your list as far as
Absolutely
authors go.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah,
he's right up there with Stephen King.
Yeah, I mean, I love Clive Barker. Like, when I was in my early 20s, he's done. And again, talk about underrated. I think a lot of people don't know what kind of impact he's actually had on like horror and media in general. I mean, he's done it all. I mean, he's done movies, books, he's directed.
He's a painter.
Yeah,
everything.
He's done video games. Like, my favorite horror video game of all time is Clive Barker's Jericho. That game was so freaky. Like,
I've never played Jericho, but I think he did another one that I wasn't crazy about. What other ones has he done? Because I have played one of them, but I wasn't overly crazy about it.
Yeah,
he's kind of a first-person shooter thing.
Yeah. Jericho was also, I think it was a first-person shooter too. But yeah, he's done like 3 or 4 games, but I think Jericho's the only one that I can remember off the top of my head. But yeah, it's like, it kind of reminds you of Hellraiser, where you're kind of going through portals into like some crazy, dystopian hellscape,
Yeah.
and you have to
Yeah,
fight
as a
off
game,
demons.
as a gamer, I'm very old school myself. I like that whole Diablo thing, which I suppose is
Oh,
pretty
okay.
similar. Like,
Yeah, it looks like Kate's been there with you from the very beginning.
how you doing, cat?
Yeah, but so what's your favorite Barker book?
Okay, and it's not a horror book. It's more a dark fantasy. I suppose you could call it a dark fantasy with horror elements, but that is Weeworld,
Oh,
absolutely for sure.
that's my next
Weeworld.
book. My next book I got to read from him.
It absolutely blows me away. I've read it 3 times,
Wow.
and I never get bored. There's something special every time I read this book. And something just different that I discover, some new magic I discover in the book every time I read it.
Yeah, that because yeah,
Weeworld is worth your time, man.
yeah, I read, of course, when I was younger, I was more into movies when I was younger than books. So books have just been like the last decade for me since I've been in my mid-20s. But
Yeah,
so all the Hellraisers growing up. I mean, that's what I grew up on, is like the slashers and the the 80s, early 90s stuff.
yeah.
But so I read the book, and I actually then me and another booktuber, Steve, we went back and watched the original movie, and the book was so much better, than the
Yeah, but isn't that always the case?
yeah,
Always the case.
yeah.
Yeah.
Most of the time, although the new Hellraiser, the graphics and everything have kind of caught up, and yeah, the new Hellraiser is amazing. But from there, I went from the Hellbound Heart to Mr. Begone. And Mr. Begone's one of my favorite books. I read all of last year. I mean, it was terrific.
I need to give that another go because I didn't rate it very highly. But maybe
satire,
because it's so different. It's like an experimental thing that Barker did, from the demon's perspective. But I think maybe I was a little bit unfair the first time I read the book. If I give it another whirl, maybe I'll see something different.
Yeah,
I didn't rate it very highly.
Yeah, I think it's going to be different than most of his books. Like once I start getting into some like Weave World and all those, because it's. I always tell people, it's like, without spoiling it or anything, it's like there are things in this book that are super dark that the demon does, but the way he perceives it is just it's a normal thing. So you're like setting things on fire and everything, and but he's like, oh yeah, this is just what we do.
That's just who he is. That's what he is.
Yeah, and you're
He's
just
a
like,
demon, man.
Holy moly, Barker! Like you just skip right over that part. You're just glazing over it like it's nothing. And like if you put that in a normal book, people would be horrified. Like,
oh no. You must just tell the folk out there that I'm having technical difficulties with my screen,
Yeah,
on my side, this looks absolutely terrible. On your side, you look picture perfect, man.
Yeah, it's a little bit laggy, but it's not too bad. You're good, and your audio is fine. So
no, that's good. And I'm on the other side of the world. Okay, you got to figure that into it as well.
Yeah, what time you got over there? Are you 5:20, 6:20?
We pushed. No, it's about 6, pushing 7 now.
Okay, all right, yeah.
In the evening, yeah.
So, and I ask people this that when I interview them that are from different countries, like even here, even close here, like Canada. I remember when I was a kid, you'd be at the library, and I'd always you'd be reading the back of the book for the blurb, and then at the bottom it would say U.S. price for book $9.99, and then it was like Canadian price $15.99. So like the books were always more expensive in Canada. Like, how is the book market in South Africa?
It all depends. If you go to a secondhand bookstore in South Africa, you're going to get books for $1 or less.
Oh, okay.
You're talking a lot of the books that I've showed off in my book hauls. There's a lot of them vintage horror, vintage science fiction, vintage fantasies. I'm getting them for about 25, 30 rand, which is about $1.
Okay,
but if you want to buy something like a graphic novel, then you're going to pay something like 700 Rand, which is freaking ridiculous. 'Cause all of those have to be imported.
Okay,
And also,
yeah.
if you go to a normal bookstore, like we have one in our village as well, we basically live in a village. Some of the books are 350, 400, 450 Rand. Just can't afford that.
Wow.
So it's
So how much
crazy.
is that US? 400?
Sorry,
How
how
much would that
much?
be US?
400 is, wait, hang on a second. Okay, 400 would be about $20, $25
Wow. For a paperback?
for paperback. Yeah,
Wow. Yeah.
yeah, like a
Yeah,
new release.
that's up there.
Yeah. Like some, you get some cheaper and some will be on special, maybe 100 Rand or 200 Rand. But so the main bookstores are way too expensive. That's why I only go to thrift stores and secondhand stores. Much better.
Do you guys have Amazon access?
We do. Yeah. Yeah. I've got a Kindle,
Okay.
so I'm
Yeah.
getting a lot of titles on Kindle. But I always like the physical book more, don't you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't you feel better?
My wife, she'll always say, she'll be like, I just love the smell of books.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
She's like, if you know, you know. Like,
Yeah, man, that's it. Really, I like to have a library at home. I just like the feel
yeah.
and the smell and the, yeah.
Yeah, I need to. Yeah, because we have two bookshelves. So originally, for the longest time, I just had like some pictures up here, and then I got
Yeah.
myself a bookshelf to throw up behind me. And my wife's like, "Well, you can't take all the good books. We got to leave some out in the living room for people to see." So, as the collection grows, I'll start like expanding out here and getting some more
Yeah,
stuff. But
yeah. Oh, I see your book there on the left there.
oh
And
yeah, yeah, yeah.
congratulations on your new novel. It's on my want to read, but you're going to have to wait until I've read 100 book challenge. And once I've read the 100 books, then I'm going to pick up your book. Okay.
Yeah, so I seen that. That's
The
been the thing.
Gods and Vampires or something. What's it?
Yeah, it's the direct sequel to More Than
Yeah,
a Vampire. So
the one I enjoyed. Yeah.
yeah, it picks up right where you left off, immediately. So it's not going to be one of these things where you're like, oh, we're jumping 50 years ahead, and now you're like, okay, I wonder what happened.
Yeah, I
But
remember it was something to do with Norse gods. The
yeah,
what was it? Yeah.
yeah, the sequel is basically Simon is now kind of in between a war of the Norse gods and the Egyptian gods, and then
Yeah.
kind of the cabals, and it's just a whole mixture of political unrest and
Yeah,
dualism.
I'm looking forward to the second one. The second one's going to be fun. But for this 100 book challenge, I have to read a lot of smaller books.
Okay.
Because I'm not allowed to buy anything before I've finished 100 books now.
Yeah. So
That's
let's
really
talk
challenging.
about that, because I've seen that going around. Is it what's it called? Is it called the Read What You Own? Is that
Read what your own challenge? Yeah, yeah. And
so?
it was
How did that start?
devised by Ollie from Criminally.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. I think that's a little bit sadistic or what masochistic to not be able to buy any books. Yeah, and I don't know how long it's going to take me. I've only read 100 books this year. I'm pushing for
I was
100.
gonna say I started BookTube last when is it, last April, something like that, and I read 62 books in like the previous year, and I'm about 60 books this year. So yeah, to read 100 books, you'd have to purposely be like going through like the shortest books ever, like to try to. That's what I did. We had like a reading challenge that I was in a couple months ago, and I was like, all right, well, I'm gonna try to read shorter books to kind of pad my stats and whatnot. But it sounds like that challenge is to kind of empty out your
Well, yeah,
bookshelf.
the purpose is so that you don't keep buying new books the whole time, and that you actually read what you own already, because otherwise it just builds up, and then you're going to, half the stuff you're actually not going to, oh, thanks, Kat, I admire you too.
Yeah,
But otherwise,
I admire you too. Like I bow down.
oh
Like
no, man, I admire you too. No, man, it's just better not to have. It's also if you don't have space, you know,
yeah,
it's almost book buying, like secondhand book buying for me is a real passion of mine. I love
that's your
it. I
kind of
love going into
addiction.
a little store and then just, looking for like 20 new books. But then you don't have the space. You don't have the cupboard space. So this is a great way to just read what you own first before going out and getting tempted every time.
Yeah, it will set. Well, I think this challenge will save people a lot of money, like
Yeah,
for
yeah, yeah,
for a
yeah,
little while. You know, be like,
yeah,
okay, put a pause on the bank account for a little bit because
yeah,
I can definitely see how this hobby that we have, right, is it
yeah,
can be really addicting. You go into a bookstore and you're like, oh man, look at it's always funny because one thing I wanted to ask you is like the whole don't judge a book by its cover, but don't we
yeah,
always
yeah.
always
We
like,
always
well,
do. No, we
that
do.
is a nice cover, like I want to go check this book out, like
Yeah, yeah. Well, if you check some of my book hauls, it's all about the covers, isn't it? Yeah, it's all about how cool the covers are. But yeah, and to be honest with you, I don't spend my money on anything but books. Like I said, we live in this little village. We don't go out. We don't go to restaurants and pubs anymore. We sit at home and work online and take our dog for a walk by the beach, watch the whales.
Yeah, I was
Do
just
that sort
about
of
to
thing.
ask what like I'm pretty good with geography. So like I was like, are you close? So evidently you are, close to the coast, or
Yes,
you're on the
we're on the
coast.
coast.
Seems
No,
like.
we're on the coast. Yeah. Um, They just don't make the mistake that a lot of Americans make and say that I'm African. I'm Southern African.
Mm.
I'm South African.
Okay,
South,
okay.
South Africa is a country. And I've heard a few people tell me, oh, you're African and you live in the south of Africa. No, South Africa is a country on the bottom. But you know that, right? Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of like people will say, and I guess it depends on what state you're from. Some states are more hardcore about this than others, but it's like, yeah, we're American. Yes, I'm American, but I'm an Ohioan. Like I'm from Ohio. Yeah, like but some people are like, yeah, United States, but I'm from Texas, or but I'm
Yeah,
from
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
So yeah,
yeah.
you're in
So
Africa, but you're a South African.
I'm a South African. Yeah.
Yeah,
Living in the continent of Africa, in the country of South
yeah.
Africa. And we're
Uh,
basically on the East Coast.
okay.
So, I mean, basically, you got the East, the South, and the West Coast. And we live in a province called KwaZulu-Natal. And so basically, we're on the southern side of KwaZulu-Natal.
Oh,
And it's
nice.
like a little village, very, very small town. And yeah, it's beautiful. And at certain times of the year, we get dolphins, we get whales, it's beautiful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's because I know as a kid. I mean, I guess what is it like? Discovery Channel Shark Week's been going on for 30 years, so for almost my whole life. They
Yeah.
always go to South Africa to see the sharks. Like I don't know if that's
Yeah.
your area, if that's more on the West
That's
Coast,
more the West Coast. It's Cape Town, where I also
Cape
spent a lot of
Town.
my time. That's actually where I used to live.
Okay.
There's a famous place close to Cape Town called Hermanus, and
Okay.
that is
Yeah, rings a
famous
bell.
for cage diving to see the great whites. And
Yeah.
in fact, all around the Cape Coast, I used to surf,
Ooh.
and uh, basically when you go out to the water on the rocks on the mountains either side of this bay where you're surfing, they have shark spotters because there's no they don't allow what do you call it? Man, to capture the sharks. They don't have those nets.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Not
yeah.
allowed. It's not ecologically friendly.
Yeah.
So what they do is they have these shark spotters, and they sound the alarm if they see a shark, and then you just get the hell out of the water.
It's like we warn you, and it's on you to get
No,
back.
then you just go out the water, man. No, but they warn you when it's so far back they can see the shark. They
Okay.
can see. They got these special binoculars,
Oh,
and so they just sound the alarm, and everyone looks at each other. Okay, let's paddle back.
yeah, well, yeah. Oh my. So you've been out there when they're like, hey, it's time to
Yeah,
roll,
yeah,
get back in.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh my
Lots
gosh.
of times. Lots of times when I used to surf. Yeah.
That would be scary and also kind of exhilarating. You're like, all right, let's
Well, yeah, a
let's
little
run.
bit. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And in fact, if you're lucky, you can catch a wave in, and you can move in a bit quicker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, so do you still surf or do you still can't get out
No,
into the
no, no,
water?
no, no. No, I don't surf anymore. No, I don't. Now it's my wife and my doggy. I suppose there is a place up the coast here where you can surf, but no, we just take nice long walks,
Yeah.
play the ball with Layla, and just yeah.
That's
No, I don't
awesome,
do that
man.
anymore. I've become a bit of a lazy shit in my older age.
You don't have to tell me about that. Like I was like, I'm, I'm kind of got the same thing. With my son, he does football, and then after football season and during the winter, we're just nothing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No,
So how's the weather? Because you guys are in the southern hemisphere, right? So are you guys going into
it's hot
summer?
now. It's hot now. We're moving into summer. Yeah, yeah. And this is kind of a subtropical area, and we had a massive storm last night. But yeah, so we get these hectic storms. It's very humid and hot and sticky, and
Ooh,
I suppose
yeah.
it's a bit like I suppose it's a bit like Florida in
Is that
America.
is that
It's
kind
like
of
that
how?
Miami kind of feel. I've been there once when I
Oh,
traveled, and so
nice.
it's very sticky. Yeah, it gets very hot and sticky, and I think it's the same kind of feel.
You're like, yeah, we
Yeah,
went from one place that was hot and sticky to another place. You're like,
yeah,
but yeah, me and my wife, that's one thing we're starting to do is travel a little bit more as as we get a little bit older. I would
yeah,
love to travel down to South Africa and see the
yeah.
coast. And you guys have some mountains down there too, don't you?
Oh yeah, yeah. We got to Drakensberg, which is in fact quite close to where we are. It's about maybe 3-4 hours drive. And at the top of the berg in winter, snow every year.
No.
And there's actually some places where you can actually go skiing. You wouldn't believe
Wow.
that, but yeah,
See,
yeah,
I love that because like you said, people are like, oh, you're African or whatever. It's like people just assume like Africa, okay, savannah or desert, and
Hey, I was
that's
going to
it.
say, how's it to Greg there? How's it, Greg? Hey, carry on.
Yeah, actually, yeah, short books. Yeah, I would. Yeah, if I was doing the 100 book challenge, it would be find the short books. But yeah, I was reading through or watching your top 10 all time, and
That was my second video, man.
yeah, I had forgot that that one of my favorite movies, one of my favorite horror movies, is actually based off a book, and you read the book, Let the Right Ones In.
Yeah, let the right one in. Yeah,
Yeah, let the right one in. Yeah, I have to
yeah.
read that now because
Oh,
the
it's
movie,
brilliant.
I loved the movie. The movie was
Yeah,
Let Me In, I think is
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
And both the Swedish and both the original Swedish version as well as the American remake, they're both brilliant. Eh?
Yeah, I think I watched both of them. I think I watched the Swedish version first,
They're
and then
both
I was like,
bloody good.
oh yeah,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
that seems what America seems to do is like if Europe makes a good movie, they're like, okay, well we'll just remake it because they did the same thing with the girl with the dragon tattoo.
Yeah, no. But I think the Swedish version is actually better, to be
Yeah,
honest.
I
I
agree.
think
I
it's
agree.
actually a very special movie. That yeah, but you must read the book.
Yeah,
You must read that book.
yeah, and I think
It'll, as a vampire story, it'll blow you away. It
yeah.
really is good.
And I think with this year was like my year of getting into more shocking books, and I made a list of like the 10 like shocking books I want to read, and I think I'm about halfway through. You just
When you say
read one of
when you
mine.
say shocking,
What's
when you
that?
say shocking, you mean extreme.
Yes,
You
yes,
mean
like
more extreme.
yeah, not necessarily a horror book, but just kind of those extreme books
Yeah,
like you just read American Psycho, and that was
yeah,
like the
yeah,
first book off the list that I had to read because I loved the movie
yeah,
from like
yeah.
2000. It came out in like 2000. Um,
Book is very disturbing.
so yeah, what yeah, what were your thoughts like when you were getting into the book? Because I know a lot of people when they first start the book, they're like, this is weird because like he's describing every little piece of clothing
Yeah,
and everything. And some people were
I
like,
didn't like
is
it.
this the
I
book?
didn't like it. I didn't like it. And the reason I didn't like it is because I don't identify with that sort of thing.
Yeah.
You know what? I think if you identify with fashion and kind of being trendy and being all that sort of thing, then you're going to actually take a lot of interest in that first part of the book because it
Yeah.
is interesting, but it's more showing his state of mind as well. But I don't have any interest in clothing, fashion, and labels and all that stuff. So
Yeah.
I also found it tough to get through that. Yeah,
Yeah, right at the
yeah,
beginning, I was like, is this the book that's based off of the movie that I watched, 20 years
yeah,
ago? And but then like when it starts going,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
way
yeah.
worse and way more
And
aggressive than the movie
it
ever
just
could.
gets worse and worse and worse. And that last 100 pages, man, that last bit, oh, what he does to those people, what he does to those women. Eesh,
Yeah.
no,
Well,
that was disturbing.
yeah, and he in the book, and like I said, I try not to do too many spoilers here on the lives, but like he kills way more people in the book. Like
Yeah,
he's
yeah,
he's killing people like you said towards the end. He's killing people all like
yeah,
left and
yeah,
right, like towards the end of the
yeah,
book.
yeah, yeah. But then there's another question as well. But let's not go there because we are
Yeah,
going into spoiler territory now. Because
yeah,
you
yeah,
talk about this book, you're going to spoil it. Yeah.
yeah.
So
We
let's
don't
just say yes, he killed lots of people.
yeah, because
Yeah,
I really I mean at the towards the end of the year I always do my like book awards and like the best books of the year, and like yeah, that's probably going to be on there somewhere because
yeah,
it was really good, and a lot of, like I said, we don't do spoilers, but a lot of questions
yeah,
towards the end of the
yeah.
book.
But my rating. Yeah, I gave it 3.5, rounded down to 3 stars. So I thought it was a good book. But I think all the clothing descriptions, as
Yeah,
Carl is saying over here, um, sorry, Greg, is that all that these descriptions were a reason why a lot of people disliked it. For me, it wasn't necessary. Not just the clothing, it was the music. Oh man,
yeah,
we talks
yeah.
about Huey Lewis in the news, like a whole
The
chapter on Huey
whole
Lewis in the news,
chapter. Yeah,
whole chapter. Yeah,
I
that's
was like,
crazy.
what are we doing here? Like he breaks. It's almost like he did a whole like breakdown of like Huey Lewis in the news. And I'm like, I
Yeah,
really
yeah,
didn't care anything about this. Like,
yeah. No, exactly. So that's why I brought it down a bit for me. I thought a lot of that was unnecessary, but it still was a very interesting book. It was a very interesting book. And it asks a lot of questions that we can't answer here because we're going to give spoilers away.
yeah,
So there's some very interesting things about that book to think about his state of mind, especially. But
yes,
if you talk about it, you give away spoilers,
yeah.
basically.
Well,
Yeah,
and also I've also read another book that was on your list, the Wasp Factory.
yeah. I found
That
it very interesting.
that book was that book was and again, it's one of those books where some of the stuff he's talking about, like you go into it, and maybe it's just me because I read a lot of fantasy books, like the
Yeah,
stuff that the kid is talking about, and like in his head he
yeah,
thinks that these things make a difference, like I
yeah,
have to do this or this
yeah,
happens,
yeah,
kind of old superstition stuff. But in my
yeah,
mind, coming from a fantasy reader, I'm like, is this real? Like, is this what we're doing? Like,
yeah. No, and the fact of the matter is that you can look at him as almost like not really schizophrenic, but you can see that he's got a mental disorder
yeah,
in the way that he talks about these things. You can see that he's got some kind of mental fracture. And a lot of the stuff that he does is actually to protect himself from the outside world. It's basically he is in his own little world, and it's kind of me versus. I mean, even the
yeah,
way that he puts out things on the island, he puts out those totems and those things on the island. It's like to keep other people out.
yeah. I think that's a
Yeah,
big thing. Is it's me and my dad or whatever against the world kind of
yeah. Even though the
feeling.
dad is messed up, eh?
Oh my god! All that. Yeah. Again, we're not going to go in any spoilers, but that was one of the weirdest, craziest endings.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Yeah.
I was just like, because for the whole book, I was just like, okay, this is a decent book. It's worth my read and everything. But then that ending, I'm like, what?
No, it's crazy. Yeah. Absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
But
And then
you know what was interesting for me about what's his name again?
Ian Banks?
No, the main character.
Oh,
the main character.
Oh, I can't remember him and it.
The way that he narrates a story, right? He's the one narrating a story. He's telling a story. It's through his eyes. The way that he's telling a story, I found you almost feel a bit of sympathy for him, where he's doing his crazy thing. But the way that he's telling the story, you feel kind of sympathetic towards him as a character, which is messed up because he's doing these messed up things. And yet you're kind of sitting there and you're thinking, this sounds perfectly reasonable. What he's doing is perfectly reasonable. So that's I felt that was actually quite clever. Actually almost fall into a trap of feeling sympathy for him. When you should actually be saying, look, this dude is wrong.
And I think that is the best thing about these shocking books is when an author can make you feel either empathy or kind of feel bad for the main character who is doing these terrible things or very questionable things.
That is quite a skill.
That's a skill, right? That's like in this book, even though I think he's on the upper end of teenage years, he's like
16.
16, 17. Yeah.
16.
Like we almost downgrade him to like feeling like he's like a 12-year-old or something, and you feel bad for him. You're like, oh, he's just a kid. His mental capabilities aren't really, but like some of the stuff he's doing, you're like, you shouldn't feel bad for him, but you do.
I mean, the very first freaking page, he talks about he's killed his brother and sister when he was younger and his cousin. And that was before he was 16. And he says, it's just a stage I was going through.
A phase. It's
not going to happen again. It's just a stage.
I was like, what? Or I was like, really? This is where we're going right off the bat. Holy moly.
Yeah.
And then
it's crazy.
And then you just read a book that I read a few months ago, and I don't think you've put out an official review for it yet. I know you've talked about it in your updates. Tender as the Flesh.
Yeah. I'm gonna give I think during my wrap up or in my update. Actually, I think I'm going to do an update probably tomorrow because I've been missing a few videos. I've been naughty.
Yeah,
but I'll do an update. Yeah, and I'll probably do a reading update tomorrow. And I found it pretty damn disturbing. I found parts of it kind of quite sickening, like just thinking about it. So
but for me, that book, it was a good book, but it's one of those books where kind of where we were talking about earlier, where like in Clive Barker's Mr. Be Gone, how he just talks normally about these crazy situations, and that's kind of the whole book. For Tender as the Flesh, it's like they've been in that weird situation for like 20 years or something like that, and it's like it's normal now the way that they do things.
That's the point. But that's the point, and for me, that makes it even more shocking. That this world is real. This dystopian world, it seems so real because that's all it's talked about, and the whole thing. There's things that he has to do. We won't go into details, but and the way that it's described, some of that stuff in just almost a clinical detachment from the subject matter. I found that freaking horrifying. To be honest. I found it more horrifying than if it was something. And I found that similar to American Psycho in a way, when you almost get used to him. I don't want to go into spoilers yet, but he does kill a lot of people.
Well,
there's a clinical detachment. It's almost like you're looking at this like this could be happening, right? I don't know. I found it very, very disturbing.
Well, okay, and I have a question I definitely wanted to ask you because I know you read a lot of darker books. Some people some people think that like scarier or more disturbing books are more are sometimes more mundane. Like they're like, oh, like people on more personal levels. I've heard people say that American Psycho didn't really click with for him because like he did too much stuff, like he killed too many people, and the way he was too extreme, so it took them out. But like me, when I'm reading a book, like I really try to get into it and I block everything else out, so I felt like I was in there with him. So it was disturbing to me. It didn't like, it wasn't so extreme that it threw me out. Like I can stay in a book no matter how extreme it is. Like how are you with it? It's like, do those smaller stories disturb you more, or
That's very interesting. It depends. I mean, I've just recently read an extreme novel that I absolutely loved. That is called The Black Farm. That I'm actually going to do a live review on with another booktuber.
awesome?
Bad is Brad, and I'm going to do a
Okay,
review
yeah.
with her. And now this is an extreme novel. This is not American Psycho. We're not talking the books we've talked about. This is brutal. This is freaking
Oh,
absolutely freaking brutal.
oh
But
man, now you're
you,
making me
you
want to
end up
read it.
no, but you end up in a world. You end up in this almost like this. I'm not going to talk about it too much, but you
Yeah,
dropped into this world that is believable. So you're there, and it's believable, and it's well described, and therefore it doesn't matter how much of the brutality comes. The story is good. The characters are interesting. The story is good. Then I'm all there for it. So I don't know if I'm answering your question. Maybe I'll maybe pose it again because maybe I didn't get all of it. But like, if the story's there and the characters are there, and I'm invested in the story, I don't mind the brutality. I don't mind the
yeah,
extreme stuff, the shocking stuff. But if it's just shock for shock's value,
yeah,
I
yeah.
read, I read, a, I, yeah, I read a book earlier this year by a famous extreme author, Ross James White, and I DNF'd it. It's called The Resurrectionist.
Okay,
Basically, the premise is this guy's got a supernatural gift. He can raise the dead, right? He breathes
necromancer.
life into the recently dead. So what does he do with his gift? He's psychotic. He goes to his neighbor, rapes her, murders her brutally, kills her, rips her to pieces, breathes life back into her, and does the same thing every night. Yeah.
That's what.
And I'm thinking, where's the story?
Yeah, what's the point? Yeah,
What's the
like
point?
there's got to
If
be
there
some
was characters,
overarching.
yeah, it's just I don't want shock for shock value. I
Yeah,
want a decent story. I want a decent. So I don't know if that answers your question. Maybe
yeah,
not. Maybe I
yeah.
misunderstood.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think I agree with you. Like as long as the writing is good, there's a story to be told there. You can have extreme things inside the
happen.
book
Yeah,
and,
because you invested in the
pull,
story.
yeah, and
Because
not
you
pull you
invested
out.
in it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
as long as you get somebody, as long as you get the reader invested, you can be as extreme as you want. But like you
yeah,
said, you can't just be like, oh, the whole story is about the gore or the whole story is
yeah,
about the extreme acts. Just like in
yeah.
fantasy, it's like, well, don't be killing off characters just to shock people because and especially nowadays, like
Yeah.
readers are smarter than that. Like we're like, okay, you killed him just to kind of shock me. It didn't impact the story at
The
all,
story, anything. Yeah, yeah. No, it's almost like a cheap shot. Huh? It's just
So
like a cheap way to get out of it. Yeah.
yeah, so with your extensive Stephen King reading, what stands now as your top Stephen King book?
The Stand.
Oh man, like that seems to be towards the top or top five of everybody's list who's read it. I haven't got around to it.
Not,
I know it's a thick boy, so I gotta like.
no, but it's actually not true. Eh? A lot of people don't like that book. They say it's too
Oh,
long, too
is it?
padded.
I
Yeah,
actually have heard that it is a little. Some people are turned off by it. Like what when I when I read a book, I can tell, like, if I've heard people say they don't like the book, and even if I do like it, I can see why people don't like it. What would you, now I haven't read The Stand yet, so why would you think some people don't like it? Is it the
Uh,
size? Is it what's in the
it's the
book?
size. The biggest criticisms I've heard against it, yeah, the size. That there's just too much filler. It's just too much stuff in between. It doesn't need to be there. And also the ending. People don't like the ending of that book. Not that we're going
Oh,
to talk about it, but
yeah.
yes,
That's
good
a
versus
Stephen King
evil.
thing, right? The ending. It's always,
Yeah,
the
I like
ending's either
it.
great or it's bad.
Yeah, I like it though. I love it. Otherwise, it wouldn't be right up there. It's up
Yeah.
there for me because of the characters. It's up there for me
Yeah.
because the characters are just unforgettable. A little bit like Swan Song. That's my favorite novel.
Yeah.
Both of those are quite similar, post-apocalypse, but the characters are just so brilliant that you kind of remember them all the time. Like I think back on some of my favorite characters, and I read the book like years ago. I can still remember the characters.
See,
And there's
that's
very
how you
few
know it's
books that
good.
have that magic. So,
Yeah.
what?
After watching your video and seeing Swan Song on there, I I immediately wrote that down. And so that is on my list to read probably January or February. I'm going to get around to it because just the way you talked it up and the
Can I just
story.
can I just get in here quickly?
Oh yeah.
You know that is the second video that I ever made. And I look back at my booktube newbie tag, and then I did that video, and I'm still feeling uncomfortable. You know, like when you're a new booktuber, yeah, I'm not overly comfortable. And now that thing's got over 1,000 bloody likes or views and stuff, and I'm thinking, how is that my most popular video? It's my second video that I've ever made, and I'm
Yeah.
still feeling, you know, when you're still feeling a little bit like, hey, I can do better than that. I was so uncomfortable. But hey, if people like it, that's great.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. I mean, like I said, I've been doing this for, it'll be 2 years here in a couple, like 4 months or something like that. But yeah, I'm still sometimes, before I get into a video, I'll be like, all right, Joe, all right, make sure you're remembering this. Like, don't try not to screw up because I'm not one of these booktubers that has like the fancy camera and I
Yeah,
don't do a super amount of editing. I try to do
yeah,
it all in one take. So if it ends up being a 10-minute video, that's probably 10
no,
minutes of
that's
me
great.
straight
Yeah,
talking.
yeah. Oh, look, I do the editing because I have to.
Oh yeah,
Otherwise,
yeah.
it'll just be a mess.
Yeah, there's some editing in there, and my editing is I think that's the thing I really try to work on the most now and that was going to be my next question is like, what have you found? What's your favorite thing about, BookTube and your least favorite thing about BookTube is what I try to ask a lot of people.
My favorite thing about BookTube is definitely the community, and the friends you make, and the people that chat with you online, and it's awesome community. And I've had almost zero negative stuff happen to me since I've joined this year. In
Yeah.
fact, I've had maybe one comment that I didn't approve of, so I just said bye bye. I knocked the guy off. But I've had nothing negative happen to me really. Recently, maybe something's happened that's been a bit disturbing, but it's okay. I can deal with it. But it's just a community and the support and it's just so many good people online. Yeah. In BookTube. I'm not sure about other areas of YouTube. I've heard it can get quite nasty. Like Twitter, I've heard it can get quite nasty. But I love the community in BookTube. And I love how they support you, you support them, and you kind of grow together. And it's lekker. I enjoy that. Have you
Yeah.
heard that term, lekker?
No. What is that, a South African?
Yeah. South African, it means it's great. It's awesome.
That's great. I like that.
My least favorite thing, I'd have to think about that. Yeah. I think sometimes the pressure of having to put out videos on time and just having to like work to a schedule. Like if you say to your viewers, you're going to do a video every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday, It often doesn't happen with me. I put it maybe Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, or I miss 3 days because something happens.
Yep.
It kind of sucks. And then you got the algorithm. I don't have any clue what that's all about. But you have these negative things, but it's at the end of the day, I still love what I do. I'm enjoying it. I've only been on for a year and I really enjoy it. So that's the big thing. You have to love what you do. Otherwise, there's no point.
Yeah, and that's the big thing for me. It's like, I don't have a lot of people like in real life that are big readers. So it's like it's the best way to get out there and be like, hey, I like these books. Who else likes these books? Let's talk about it. And this here is my favorite thing. Is getting to communicate with other booktubers and just talk about crazy fun books. And
I think that's what I was actually trying to say to you, the booktube community, because besides my wife, we kind of quite isolated now. We have our friends and family maybe 3-4 times a year come visit us, or we go to them, but it's just the two of us. We both love reading, we both love horror, but there's no one else to talk to. So to have that community, you're right, that you can chat to. And let's look at book recommendations and what do you think of this? Absolutely right.
Yeah. And I don't know if, I mean, I guess you started off, and your whole channel is kind of based around a lot of horror. But I feel like the horror community is pretty tight. Is pretty, they're really good. Like they all kind of come to, and they really want to talk, like, because I'll see like Criminali's doing really well over there, and he does a lot of the shocking books too.
Look, it's also because I think it's because it's such a niche community, the horror community. I mean, if you think about it, fantasy is much larger, right?
Yeah.
So I think there is a lot more people involved in fantasy booktubing than in horror. So horror is a little bit more niche. It's just a little bit more niche. So I think people kind of band together. That's my opinion anyway.
So, and this is one of the main questions I wanted to ask you, because I ask all the booktubers that actually read horror this question: why do people love horror books?
Okay. And I actually did a video on this much earlier in the year, but I thought about it, and I thought about some of the responses that my viewers had. And I think the biggest thing is that it is a couple of things. First of all, it's an escape, okay? And it's horror incites fear, it incites terror, it incites fear. And you'd think that those kind of emotions, people wouldn't really be interested in having anything to do with them. But what you're actually doing is you're actually bringing out the monsters. You're facing those fears. And you're doing that in a safe environment. So you can sit back with your book. You can close it at any time. And by reading this stuff, you can actually work through it. You can actually, what's the best way to describe it? Clive Barker used to talk about monsters and how he brings the monsters into the light. So you can see what's there. You can see the stuff that's there. So by having it there, you can deal with it, right? Stephen King said something similar, like why he writes horror, why he reads horror. It's like having this space inside you where you have to feed the crocodiles. Otherwise they're going to come out, right? So it's like and it's therapeutic. You're working ways to deal with these demons. You're working ways to deal with the monsters. And you're working in the story. Yes, you get this fear, but it's like a roller coaster. Someone else said that as well.
Exactly.
Like going up. And this fear and adrenaline, it's exciting. And then you go down the other side. And it's a book. You can close it. At the end of the day, you can close it.
Yeah, and you can stop it whenever you need.
Yeah, and it's cathartic. I mean, is that the right word? Yeah, it's cathartic. That was intense. But now I've done it. I've dealt with it. And I think that's one reason people read horror. I think another reason is that, I suffer from anxiety. And I think a lot of people suffer from different things. And a lot of people are more in touch with the dark side. Maybe they're insomniacs, or they're like children of the night, right? Then they're going to be more attracted to things like, they're going to empathize more with creatures like vampires, right? So I think it also depends on the person. Yeah, but there's lots of reasons why people really enjoy horror. But I think those are the main ones. I mean,
Yeah,
it's exciting. It's escapism. It's escapism. And fear is an emotion. And if you can control that within a safe space, it's exciting. And it gives you adrenaline. It gives you a bit of a rush.
yeah,
And the fact of the matter is, you working your way through the book. You're working your way through the stuff that's happening, and you don't have to deal with the outside world, with the real terrors and fears of the outside world. You're dealing with it in this book, right? I don't like reading about things like this. I don't like watching a lot of horror movies. That's one thing about me. I don't watch a lot of horror movies anymore. I find it too intense. I think the
oh,
new modern wave. I think the new modern wave of these French movies about home. What do they call it?
home invasions.
Home invasion and hectically brutal. I hate that.
Yeah,
And
that's become a new
yeah,
genre, right? A big
yeah.
genre recently in the
And you know
last
why
five
it's upsetting
years.
to me? It's upsetting to me because we've had that. And we have
Yeah,
this
I
in
think
the
that's why
script
they
all
do it,
the time.
because it's real. They're like,
It's real.
this could
Yeah.
really happen, you know.
No, it happened to us. It's
Oh,
happened to my family. It's
oh,
happened to my mom and dad. It's happened to my brother, my sister-in-law living in Joburg. You know, gunpoint, like invasions. It's hectic there. Really hectic. That's why we moved. So watching that kind of stuff is very upsetting to me. It's not something I want to watch. I don't want to watch it. It's too close to home. But watching stuff with monsters, that's fine. Like it, whatever, I can do that.
yeah.
Reading about monsters and the supernatural. It's ghosts and monsters and stuff. It's fun. It's
Yeah, well,
actually,
and I would say now you said that you know, horror is not quite as big as fantasy, and I would say that kind of like on BookTube, there's more presence of fantasy booktubers, but I think if you look at a lot of movies, right, horror movies, that
yeah,
they're not normally the biggest budget, but there's so many of them because
yeah, yeah,
like so many people like to watch horror movies. I just think
yeah,
there's not as much presence
yeah.
on BookTube for horror people.
And
Um,
if you think about it, the movies, the fantasy movies are few and far between. I don't understand it. Fantasy is so popular,
yeah,
and yet, I mean, you got Lord of the Rings. You don't get these epic fantasy movies. Yeah, I mean, I love Game of Thrones,
yeah,
but horror, you get all sorts of
yeah.
Stephen King.
Yeah, every book Stephen King gets adapted in some form.
Yeah, Clive Barker, Hellraiser. There are lots of popular horror movies, but how many really popular fantasy movies are there that have
Yeah,
been adapted?
yeah. I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
you know, and as I've asked people this, you know, I've asked other people like, you know, why do people love horror? And I think now in your case, there's certain genres that you won't like because, like I said, it's like real, you know, like
yeah,
home invasion genre and stuff. But I think, especially over here in the United States, like over here, we like to complain a lot about, like, you know, I just don't get me started on that, but we complain about nothing over here. Um, but the reason why I think, especially like in the United States and Britain and stuff, just eat up horror is because in actuality, our lives have been very mundane over the last 100 years. So we want to see this crazy stuff. You know, we would like, you know, a lot of the majority of people go into an office for 8 hours a day
yeah, yeah.
and they're just
And
under the
we
stage.
do too, eh? We do too.
Yeah,
we do as
yeah,
well.
yeah,
But I agree with what you're saying because you look into Halloween and you look at how Americans take Halloween very, very, very seriously.
yeah.
And that's probably the same thing. I cannot believe it. I cannot believe it. I've watched videos where you guys have shops where the whole shop is just these pumpkins and you think we couldn't even get a pumpkin. We got like we got like one plastic pumpkin. We can't get that stuff. Oh yeah,
But yeah, I think it's like you said, it's an escapism. It's a just like a roller coaster, just like going to a
yeah,
theme park. You know, it's let's be as scared as we can possibly be in the safest possible way, you know.
That's the
And
thing.
it's like, okay,
You have
if it gets too much, I'll close the book. But like, I really, I don't, you know, kind of out of the corner of my eye, like I want to be scared, you know.
Yeah, but you have the control, basically. So you have the control. You got the monster there on the page. You can do what you need to do. You can feel the thrill and everything else. And also the idea that most of the books are going to resolve themselves. You know, the good guys are going to win. Well, most of the time, sometimes not. But normally it's a story. And you know that you're going to get through peaks and troughs and everything. And at the end of the day, you're going to close a book. And that's it.
Well, yeah, and most of these shocking or extreme books, they're mostly standalones. So you know the story's gonna kind of resolve itself some way at the end.
Yeah. No, they are standalone. I think the difference between a lot of these extreme books and your normal horror books is, you're not going to get often you don't get happy endings.
Yeah.
That's for sure. And it is, look, you think American Psycho is bleak and disturbing. Okay, look, the ending of American Psycho for me was just very disturbing.
Yeah.
But you know what I'm talking about. The deaths and the murders or whatever.
Yeah.
But this book that I read, wow. And no, so bleak. But it's done in such a fantastical setting, such a believable, original, creative way. It's so brutal. But yet it's done in such a way that it's brilliant. Even though sometimes what the hell am I reading here? But you invested in the story.
Yeah, when I started going online and like watching other people's videos, and then just going down top 10 lists, that, you know, just Googling top 10 lists and like picking out, and I still have probably half of my top 10 want to read list to do. But like, you always tend to get into these books and you're like, what am I at some point or other, you're like, what am I reading? You're like, this is, you know, these stories. So right now, what is your number one extreme book, you know, or shocking book that you have read so far?
I'm trying to decide if this is an extreme book, but not really. It's a novella. I gave it 5 stars. It's a novella. And it's an extreme horror author. But if you're going to look for a book or a story that is kind of almost a stepping stone between your normal horror and your extreme horror, I would recommend Gone to See the Riverman.
Okay.
It's something Trioni. What's it? Patrick Trioni or something? I can't remember his name. Gone to See the Riverman. It is short. It's quite brutal, but it's not gratuitous. It's not. I just found it very, very, very interesting. Such an awesome read, but it's not like kind of over the top gore and over the top shock value, but it is disturbing. It is freaking disturbing.
I think I've seen that in one of your updates.
Sorry?
Yeah, I think I've seen that in one of your updates, and then somebody else recently just read that book, and I'm like, okay, this is, you know,
that was a 5-star read for me. That was a brilliant read. And now I read a recent one by the same author last month, but I didn't like it nearly as much. It's a graveyard one. Damn, man. The Prettiest Girl in the Grave.
I watched that.
But it was okay. It was not that. I don't know. I found it a little bit. The writing is still very good, but all these goth girls were a bit melodramatic, and it was a bit much for me. But Gone to See the Riverman is seen as an extreme horror novel, but I wouldn't really say it's that extreme. But it's
like your stepping stone into
like
the world.
Stepping stone. I would say the best one I've read that is truly extreme is the one I'm going to do a video review with Bad is Rad. We're going to do the Black Farm. Now that I've done my first video, I'm going to make sure I don't screw up the picture. I'm going to make sure we can do it properly.
Yeah, I think
Um,
like I said, I'm using just a regular old laptop too, and I just use my phone. But a big thing, just buy yourself a light, a ring light. I got two. I got
yeah,
two of them. You can get them on Amazon for like $10,
yeah. I
$15.
might have to fly to Germany to get one.
Uh,
You see a
uh,
local spa if it's got one. I don't know. That's the thing is we could have used our camera or something, but it's such an old camera. We don't have. We need a newer camera. We could have used something like that. And her laptop, my wife's laptop, actually had a much better picture, but we couldn't get the. It was 5 to 6, and we couldn't get the microphone to
oh, okay.
work or the camera to work or anything. So we started panicking at 6 o'clock. Okay, let's change it back.
No, hey, you're good. Trust me. Trust me. I'm always on here messing with stuff an hour before I go on because yeah, I've had all kinds of technical difficulties before.
Yeah.
I re-
Well,
I was on here with a big time author one time, and my signal, my Wi-Fi signal went out, and I'm like, I'm gonna look so unprofessional. Like we were like 10 minutes, we were 10 minutes into this. I had to flip it to my phone, and I'm sorry, I apologize.
you know what I was actually hoping is because it was very overcast and raining. I was hoping I was going to say to you at the end there might be a huge storm here a little bit later. So maybe with this you could see the lightning and the flashes.
Oh yeah, yeah.
We just have that. You know, we're talking horror. Come on.
Oh, dude, that is so great, man. But yeah, I know you're way ahead of me right now, so I don't want to. I don't know if you still have to eat or if it's starting to get dark over there for
Oh,
you.
we'll be okay. Yeah, we'll be all right.
Yeah,
I think it's
but
about 7:30 now. I don't know how long we've been on, but it's been great. Eh?
yeah, man, this has been one of my favorites. I'm not gonna lie. I love talking horror and it's really a new genre. So unpredictable. Yeah. But yeah, this is I don't get
Technology is great. I just see what you said. Technology is great when it works. It's unpredictable. How's a cat? This is not working.
dude. Hey, no. Hey, at least your microphone works. I've had times where
Oh
my
no,
mic
no, no.
where my mic goes out and now I'm like, now we can't even talk. Like
No, you see but we started at 6, and I use natural light, so we don't have any problem with light normally. If we had started at about 4:30, but then it's too early for you, hey. But if we had
hey,
started about 4:30, then the light still would have come in, then we wouldn't have had this.
hey,
You know?
I would love to do another one of these or do a book review or something. And hey, we could push it earlier in the day if we have to.
Yeah,
Um,
we'll do one now.
but like, what do you?
Next time you'll actually be able to see me.
So what do you got going on here? I know we were talking about your up and coming live, but like what all do you have planned out? What are you getting into? What are you reading?
What am I reading? What am I reading?
Yep. Well, what can people look forward to over the next
Yeah,
couple
yeah,
weeks?
yeah, yeah. Oh, well, I'm doing this 100-book challenge, as I say. So what I've just finished is very nasty. I finished it last night. I don't know if you've heard of it. This is actually another good stepping stone, Poppy Z. Bright. But her work is intensely erotic as well, and very hectic. It bloody all sorts of body fluids. No, it's like a. I don't know if you've read Interview with a Vampire.
Yeah, I'm actually watching
Yeah.
the new series. Two
Okay.
episodes.
Well, it's like Interview with a Vampire on steroids, basically. And it's very dirty, very nasty, and yeah, but very dark. Very evocative. Her language is just brilliant. His language, sorry.
Yeah, my
Um,
wife would love that.
so yeah,
She's the Rising is her favorite book of all time, so she's into all that stuff.
Poppy Z. Bright. Poppy Z. Bright. Yeah, yeah. And then now I'm reading. I think what is it called again? Hey, you got me thinking now. Oh, it's a little novella. Remember, I'm doing the 100-book challenge. It's a little novella that I've almost finished. I've started it 2 hours ago. It's called Below by Laurel Hightower. It's actually very, very good.
Okay.
And that's part of a cryptid readathon that I'm doing. So it's a readathon where you read about different kinds of cryptids, sea
Yeah,
cryptids, land-based cryptids,
all into
and
that.
I'm gonna present some South African cryptids as well. Even though I
I'm
couldn't
gonna
find a book.
be. I've been waiting because I am super interested in that. Like that's how I got started doing videos. Before I started doing long form videos, I did
Yeah.
shorts and TikToks about cryptids and creatures. That was my
Okay.
thing.
Well, I'm
So,
going to be doing a presentation on South African cryptids. Even
oh,
though there's no
love that.
books on it that I can find, I'm going to do some research and talk about the tokolosh, which is
Oh,
a
nice.
Zulu cryptid. And kids
Oh,
have to put bricks under their beds, otherwise the tokolosh is going to get them.
oh,
But there's all these South African cryptids that are very cool. So I'm going to do that as well.
oh, I love that stuff.
Um,
I can't wait to
that's
see that
good.
video.
Yeah, so it's going to be a fun month, man. And I've
All
got some
right.
other cryptid stuff to read for the readathon, and yeah, it's good.
But yes, thank you, Cliff, for being on here. Everybody, everybody who's watching this on the rewatch, make sure you go subscribe to Cliff if you are into horror, shocking books, most disturbing things, the dark gems. He will hook you up and get you into some really amazing books.
And you might be able to see his face as well.
and yes, when you watch his normal videos, it is nice and bright out. Thank you, everybody, for stopping in, and thank you, Cliff.